I still remember the weight of that night, how it settled on my chest like a cinder block. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal, just a family dinner, a night out after a long week. My wife, Angela, had been talking about trying this new bar and grill over in Huntsville, said the reviews were good, and folks online were raving about the ribs. So we piled into the car, me, her, and the kids, Marcus, who just turned 16 and thinks he's grown, and little Layla, who still clings to my leg like she's 5 instead of 9. The place was called Baker's Tavern. Small, but nice-looking from the outside. Warm lights glowing through the windows, laughter spilling out every time the door swung open. We parked, stepped out, and made our way to the entrance, Layla's little hand curled in mine. I remember the way she tilted her head up at me, her brown eyes big with excitement. We stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was how the noise seemed to dip just a little, not enough for someone to call it out, but enough that I felt it. A few heads turned, conversations slowed. My gut tightened, but I pushed it aside. It's 2024, I told myself. Not 1964. A young hostess stood behind a podium, looking at us like we'd wandered into the wrong room at a funeral. She was blonde, maybe early 20s, shifting on her feet like she didn't know what to say. "Hey there," I said, keeping my voice light. "Table for 4. She glanced past me, over to the bar, where a man stood wiping a glass with a rag. Big guy, salt and pepper hair, red in the face like he'd been standing too close to a fire. He caught her look, then set the glass down and walked over. "Evening," he said. No smile. No welcome. I nodded. "Evening. We were hoping to grab a table." He sniffed, eyes flicking over us one by one. "We're full up." I looked past him. There were at least 5 empty tables. Probably more in the back. "Doesn't look that way," I said, keeping my tone even. The man, his name tag said Tom Baker, so I figured he must have been the owner, shrugged. "We're short-staffed. Kitchen can't handle any more orders." Angela shifted beside me, arms crossing. "We can wait." Tom sighed, like we were causing him some kind of trouble. "Look, I'm gonna be straight with you. I think y'all would be more comfortable somewhere else." And there it was. No fancy words. No excuses. Just a wall slamming down between us and that food we'd been looking forward to. Layla tugged at my hand, voice small. "Daddy." Marcus, my boy, took a step forward. "Man, that's bull." I put a hand on his shoulder, stopping him before he said something he couldn't take back. Not because he was wrong. Because I knew how this played out. I'd seen it before. Felt it before. Angela pulled out her phone, started recording. "Say that again," she said, her voice sharp now. Tom's face darkened. "Ma'am, I don't need to explain myself. Y'all need to leave." And just like that, we were back outside. The door shut behind us. Cold air hit my face. My hands shook, but not from the cold. Marcus muttered under his breath. Layla clung to me, her little fingers gripping tight. Angela was still filming, her lips pressed into a thin line. "This isn't over," she said. And she was right. It was just the beginning. Angela didn't waste a second. The moment we got back in the car, she uploaded the video. A simple caption. "Denied service for no reason. Welcome to 2024. By the time we pulled into our driveway, the post had already been shared a few hundred times. By midnight, it had exploded. Thousands of comments, shares, retweets. People were mad, real mad. Some were calling for boycotts, others were digging up old reviews, finding complaints from other black customers who'd just had a bad feeling about Baker's Tavern but never said anything. It wasn't just locals either. News outlets picked it up. First the smaller ones, then the big boys, CNN, MSNBC. Even Fox had a spin on it, though they acted like maybe we'd done something to provoke it. I sat in the living room, phone buzzing non-stop, trying to process it all. Marcus was pacing, still fuming. "We just gonna let him get away with it," he snapped. I looked at him. My boy. Taller than me now, shoulders filling out. He had fire in his eyes, the kind of fire I used to have before life beat it down a little. "No," I said finally. "We're not." By morning, there were protests outside Baker's Tavern. People with signs, chanting, taking turns calling Tom Baker every name under the sun. Some were white folks who didn't take kindly to what they saw in the video. Others were black folks who'd been through it before, tired of swallowing the same bitter pill. Angela sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open, watching it all unfold in real time. Layla was next to her, coloring, too young to understand all of it, but old enough to know something wasn't right. Angela exhaled, rubbing her temples. They've already lost 100 Google reviews overnight. 1-star ratings, people calling them racist. Good, Marcus muttered. Me? I just sat there, staring at the screen. I wanted justice, of course I did. But something about this, it felt too easy. The doorbell rang. A reporter. Then another. People calling, asking for interviews. I let Angela handle most of it. I wasn't in the mood to keep explaining why being treated like a second-class citizen in your own country was a problem. Then came the moment I didn't expect. Dad, Marcus said, holding up his phone. You need to see this. I leaned over. It was a new video, one someone had dug up from years ago. It was grainy, shaky, but I recognized it instantly. It was from the night that tornado hit Huntsville back in 2011. And right there, in the middle of the chaos, was me, pulling an unconscious man out of a flipped truck. A white man. Tom Baker. My stomach dropped. Angela looked over my shoulder. Is that? Yeah, I said, my voice quiet. The man who had refused us a table, who had looked my family in the eye and told us to go somewhere else, was the same man I had saved from the wreckage all those years ago. And he didn't even know it. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that truck flipped over on the side of the highway, rain coming down in sheets, my hands slick with blood and mud as I pulled a stranger from the wreckage. I remembered the way his chest barely moved, how I pressed my fingers to his neck, searching for a pulse. I saved Tom Baker's life. And now he had the nerve to look me in the face and tell me I wasn't welcome at his damn restaurant. Angela was scrolling through her phone in bed, shaking her head. People are putting two and two together, she said. The comments are blowing up. Tom Baker refused service to the same black man who saved him from dying in a car crash. Marcus was still wired, pacing the house. You should call him out, he said. Make him admit it. I exhaled through my nose, running a hand over my face. And then what? He can't just act like it didn't happen. He already has. The thing was, I never expected gratitude. When I saw that truck twisted like an old soda can, I didn't stop because I thought the guy inside might thank me later. I stopped because it was the right thing to do. But this was different. This was a man who owed his very breath to me, and still, when he saw me in his doorway, he saw nothing but the color of my skin. Morning came, and Baker's Tavern was empty. The boycott had teeth. Videos showed the place looking like a ghost town, the parking lot bare, the inside quiet except for a couple of desperate-looking employees waiting for customers who weren't coming. The protest outside hadn't let up either. News crews had parked themselves across the street, watching as people marched with signs, their voices filling the air. Tom Baker finally broke his silence. A statement was posted to the restaurant's Facebook page. We regret the recent incident at our establishment. We are reviewing our policies to ensure every customer is treated fairly. We apologize for any misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Marcus practically threw his phone when he read it. You kidding me? A misunderstanding. Angela scoffed. That man looked you in the face and told you to leave. What's there to misunderstand? The comments tore him apart. Nobody was buying it. People wanted a real apology. They wanted him to say what he did and why. But he didn't. He just shut off the restaurant's social media and kept his head down. Until the video resurfaced. It wasn't just people online putting the pieces together now. It was the news. That night, a local anchor laid it all out on the 6 o'clock report. The owner of Baker's Tavern, now under fire for racial discrimination, was once rescued from a near-fatal car accident by the same black man he refused to serve. They ran the footage. The wreckage. Me pulling him out. And then, a clip of Tom Baker, standing in the doorway of his restaurant, shaking his head. I think y'all would be more comfortable somewhere else. The story had officially grown legs. And for the first time, Tom Baker couldn't just ignore it. By the next morning, Tom Baker's name was on every major news site in the country. CNN ran a segment, "Restaurant owner who refused black families service was saved by the same man years ago." MSNBC had a panel of analysts shaking their heads, talking about the deep roots of racial bias. Even Fox News, which had been trying to spin it at first, started backpedaling when they realized how bad it looked. Baker's Tavern was done for. Angela sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, scrolling through article after article. Layla sat beside her, swinging her feet, too young to understand the full weight of what was happening but smart enough to know something big was going on. Marcus, on the other hand, was fired up. "He still hasn't said a damn thing," he muttered, pacing. "Not even an apology." "He will," Angela said, setting her cup down, "when his bank account starts feeling it." And she was right. The restaurant was bleeding money. First, it was the boycott, then delivery services like DoorDash and Uber Eats pulled them from their platforms. Their suppliers started distancing themselves. Even the local brewery that provided their beer cut ties, posting a statement saying they stood against discrimination of any kind. Then, the employees started quitting. First, the younger ones, the servers who didn't want their names attached to the controversy. Then, the kitchen staff. By noon, someone posted a picture of a handwritten sign taped to the front door. "Closed until further notice." I stared at the screen, watching as the camera zoomed in on those 4 words. I should have felt something, relief, satisfaction, something, but all I felt was tired. Then my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. I picked up. Silence for a second. Then a voice, rough and low. "James." I knew that voice. Even without seeing his face, I knew. Tom Baker. I let the silence stretch. He must have known I wasn't going to make this easy, because he sighed and cleared his throat. "Look, I saw the news." "No shit." He hesitated. I didn't know it was you." A bitter laugh slipped out before I could stop it. "That's supposed to mean something." Another pause. He exhaled through his nose. I don't know what to say." I leaned forward, resting my elbow on my knee. "Say what's true." Tom didn't answer right away. I could hear something in his breathing, something I hadn't heard before. Not anger. Not defensiveness. Something else. Regret. "Can we talk?" he finally asked. "In person?" I should have said no. But for some reason, I didn't. "Fine," I said. "You know where to find me." I didn't tell Angela right away. Not because I was keeping it from her, just because I wasn't sure how I felt about it myself. Tom Baker, a man who looked me in the eye and told me my family wasn't welcome in his restaurant, now wanted to sit down and talk. And yet, after everything, I found myself waiting for him. Late that afternoon, I sat on my porch, watching the sun dip low over the trees. The air was thick with Alabama heat, the kind that sticks to your skin. Marcus sat on the steps, phone in his hands, scrolling. Layla was inside with Angela, drawing at the kitchen table. Then, a car pulled up. Black Chevy Silverado. Big. Older model. I recognized it from the parking lot of Baker's Tavern. Tom stepped out. He looked different. Or maybe it was just that I'd never really seen him before. He wasn't as big as I remembered, just a regular man, weighed down by something heavier than the Alabama heat. His shirt was wrinkled, his salt and pepper hair messier than before. Marcus stood up fast. "What's he doing here?" I put a hand on his shoulder. "Go inside." His jaw clenched. "You serious?" "Go inside, Marcus." He exhaled sharply, giving Tom one last hard look before pushing past the screen door. I heard Angela's voice inside, sharp and questioning. Tom cleared his throat, his boots scuffing the driveway. "Wasn't sure if you'd actually meet me." I leaned back in my chair. "Didn't say I'd meet you. Said you knew where to find me." He nodded, rocking on his heels. "Guess I deserved that." I didn't say anything. Just waited. Tom shoved his hands into his pockets. I don't even know where to start. How about the beginning?" A bitter chuckle. Not sure I even know where that is. I raised an eyebrow. Try the part where you looked my wife and kids in the eye and told us to leave. He flinched. I saw it, even though he tried to hide it. Yeah, he muttered. That. For a second, he just stood there, jaw tight, like he was wrestling with himself. Then he let out a breath and looked at me, really looked at me. I was wrong. The words hung between us. I stayed silent. Tom sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I ain't got no excuses. I could sit here and tell you I grew up a certain way, that I was raised around certain people, that things get taught to you whether you ask for it or not. But at the end of the day, I made a choice. And it was the wrong one. I studied him. Why now? He exhaled. Because I've spent the last 3 days watching my life fall apart, and for the first time, I can't blame nobody but myself. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Tom looked out at the road, shaking his head. I've been thinking a lot about that night. The crash. He nodded. I barely remember any of it. Just flashes. Waking up in the hospital, them telling me some guy pulled me out before the truck caught fire. I never even thought about who you were. Just assumed you were some random good Samaritan. I tilted my head. And if you had known... His face twisted, like he hated the answer that came to mind. I don't know. He sighed, looking down at the dirt. And that's the worst part, ain't it? I let those words settle. Then I asked the only question that mattered. What do you want from me, Tom? He met my eyes. A chance to make it right. I didn't say anything right away. Just sat there, weighing his words, watching the way his hands fidgeted in his pockets, like he wasn't used to asking for anything. Finally, I leaned forward, resting my arms on my knees. Making it right ain't about words, I said. It's about what you do next. Tom nodded, swallowing hard. I know. And for the first time, I believed he did. Tom Baker left that evening looking like a man who had been forced to hold a mirror up to himself and didn't like what he saw. I watched his taillights disappear down the road, Marcus still fuming behind me. You really sat there and listened to him? He asked, arms crossed tight. I turned, meeting his glare. Yeah, I did. He scoffed. Man, I don't get you. That dude didn't even recognize you after you saved his life. You think he would have apologized if the whole world wasn't watching? I exhaled. Maybe not. So what now? We just forgive him. I shook my head. Forgiveness ain't something you hand out like a coupon. It's earned. Marcus huffed, running a hand over his head, his frustration simmering just below the surface. I just don't want you getting played. I hear you. I clapped a hand on his shoulder, gripping it firm. But listen to me. When a man finally realizes he's been wrong his whole life, that don't mean he gets a pat on the back. It means he's got work to do. And I intend to see if Tom Baker's actually willing to do it. The next morning, Angela sat at the table, scrolling her phone as she sipped her coffee. Tom just posted a real apology. Marcus snorted from across the room. Let me guess. More, I'm sorry if you were offended nonsense? No, Angela said, holding up the screen so I could see. This one's different. I took the phone and read the statement. It wasn't long, but it had weight. I did something terrible. I let my prejudice blind me, and I hurt a good man and his family. I have no excuses. No justifications. Only regret. James Carter saved my life, and I didn't even see him. That's the kind of blindness I've lived with my whole life, and I don't want to be that man anymore. I know an apology isn't enough. That's why I'm closing Baker's Tavern permanently. I don't deserve to profit from something built on exclusion and ignorance. But I also know walking away isn't enough either. I need to learn. I need to change. And I will. I just hope one day I can prove it. I set the phone down, letting out a slow breath. Marcus blinked. Wait, he's shutting it down? For good. Angela nodded. Looks that way. For the first time in days, the house was quiet. I wasn't sure how to feel. This wasn't just a man doing damage control. He was walking away from his business, his livelihood. That wasn't an easy thing to do. Dad. Layla's small voice broke the silence. She was standing in the doorway, her big brown eyes watching me. "Is the bad man still bad?" I looked at her for a long moment, then pulled her into my lap, kissing the top of her head. "I don't know, baby girl," I said honestly. "But maybe he's trying to be better." She frowned, thinking hard. Then, finally, she nodded. "That's good." I met Angela's gaze. She gave me a small, knowing smile. "Yeah, maybe it was." If this story resonated with you, share it with those who need to hear it. Let's start conversations that matter and that will lead to change. Subscribe to our channel for more stories like this that challenge us, inspire us, and remind us of what we are capable of when we stand up for what is right.